Well, hi, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This is the show that takes a look back at the week that was in Washington, D.C. through the lens of the second Trump administration. We got a lot to talk about here on this episode of the show. And so joining me on this roundtable is David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst, and Dan Andros, who is the host of CBN's Quick Start podcast. And gentlemen, let's start in Iran. There are protests continuing in Iran, now in their third week, actually going back to late December. And it centers around the country's collapsing economy and their collapsing currency, really dire situations. We think inflation's bad here in the United States, and it is not good, but in Iran, it's off the charts, and there is massive unrest in Iran because of this. One of the fiercest and largest scale protests that the country has seen against its leadership in years. Reporting indicates President Trump was close to issuing military strikes on Iranian targets for the killing of protesters. Some reports and estimates say thousands have been killed in Iran during these protests. He reportedly reversed course, however, during the course of the week when it was told him by intelligence services that those killings have stopped. And so, David, I want to start with you on this. Reportedly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, of all people, urged him to hold off on attacking Iran. And Netanyahu has been at the forefront of a more aggressive military stance toward Iran. In fact, it was Netanyahu and the president who were at the forefront of the attacks on the Iranian nuclear sites a couple of months ago. And so, arguing with President Trump, arguing the Iranian government wouldn't fall without a protracted military campaign and urging restraint at this time with regard to attacking Iranian sites. So, David, how close do you think Trump was to moving forward with military strikes on Iran, and what are the chances it could happen at some point?
I think it was very close, and I think the word was will become is very shortly. I think it's going to happen, and I just think it's a matter of time. We know that there's military equipment and certain what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I would just call it equipment, vessels and others moving towards the region as we speak. I think this is just a matter of making sure I's are dotted and T's are crossed, if you will. I really do think, gentlemen, it's a matter of time at this point. Look, I mean, President Trump has said, and it's not just a wild Truth Social post at 3 a.m. I mean, he's been very clear about this, that they better not, the Iranian regime better not mess with the protesters. And now we know what, 2,000, 4,000, 12,000, 20,000. We're not quite sure how many, but many are dead. And so President Trump and weakness do not go in the same sentence. And President Trump would look extremely weak if he said, how dare you, better not cross my red line. And then they cross the red line and he doesn't do a thing. I think you're going to see something happen. I think the question will be soon, and we'll be talking about it probably on the next podcast, is my sense, is what does that strike look like? Was it successful? And how do they go about it? Because the truth of the matter is, and I think the conversations inside the White House right now are, look, if you're going to do it, you got to make sure it's effective and it's going to be a catalyst for final regime change. And I use that word carefully here, catalyst, because I don't think what you want is, and I don't think the United States is considering this, is some sort of attack on the regime itself, as in, we're going to take out heads of state, like what we saw in Venezuela. That's not what we're talking about here. I think what we're talking about is to, in essence, to have some sort of attack that will be able to cripple the regime to the point where the protesters will then be able to, if you will, seize power. But that means you have to take the IRGC away from this regime and make sure you actually strike in those areas. So I think that's what we're talking about here, along with a lot of other things that we just don't have privy or information or privy to. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, and Dan, Iran has long been a thorn in the side of the West and specifically the United States. This isn't the first time also Iran has had protests, but I guess the question is, could these protests be different? Is there something about these protests that are different from protests that we have seen in the past where, and maybe it is, you have a White House that is more willing to engage in a military option in Iran, where Republican and Democratic administrations in the past have both been reluctant to launch military strikes against Iran. And I know some of the arguments for this, Dan, is, there are proxies nearby, Lebanon and Syria, that have traditionally helped Iran and been a counterweight to any potential U.S. military strikes. Those regimes have either fallen or are in turmoil at the moment. So do you get a sense that these protests are different and that U.S. military strikes, I mean, understanding we're not military experts, like David said, there's a lot we don't know. What do you make of these protests, and do they feel any different?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It does feel a little different this time, in part because of those weakened proxies. I mean, Hezbollah's running around there with they're all short a few digits after Operation Grim Beeper, and they're thinking twice about engaging in some of these things. And I think I don't know. I kind of think back to, you remember when George Bush, the first George Bush, urged Iraqis to rise up, and then they just went and got slaughtered, and then we didn't do anything. I think it feels a little different this time because Trump has shown a willingness to at least engage a little farther than the typical American president would. So I think there's probably, number one, a lot of belief in the Iranian people that President Trump would support them if they continue to rise up. He has shown that he is willing to do that. And also, I think when the protests are fueled largely by some of those economic problems that you talked about, like these are real world problems, right? Like, hey, I can't get food. Those sorts of things can be a bigger rallying cry and be more unifying for the people versus, a religious or other political conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I was just going to make the point to you, David. Right. I mean, it's like if you have a choice between not eating and protesting and then, dying because of your protests. Well, if you're starving, or if you're not eating, or if life's become miserable, the incentive to protest becomes more obvious, I think.
Yeah, and this is also, remember, economic at its heart. I mean, there's a lot of other things going on here, obviously repression and all of that, and brutality, and they're fed up with this regime. But this is coming from the shopkeepers, right? I mean, this is coming from kind of like the man on the street, if you will, and that makes this a bit different. I do want to say something that I think is significant. Listen to me, I'm talking about how significant what I'm about to say is. This is something so important. Boy, that might be the most narcissistic comment ever in the history of narcissism. But I'll say this, that there is a difference. I've covered this president, known him 15 years or so, and obviously I covered him in term one and now term two. There's a big stark difference between term one and term two. He has fallen in love with being the peace president. That's the difference. This is significant because if you think about it, right? I mean, it hasn't been so much make America great again as it's been make the Western Hemisphere great again. He's in essence the acting president of Venezuela. Okay, sorry, Delcy Rodriguez, but come on. He's the acting president of Venezuela. Soon, potentially the chancellor of Greenland. Who the heck knows what's going on there? He has, in the United States here in Washington, the Institute of Peace is now literally called the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. And then, of course, we have what's going on in Iran, where he literally said the toxic and very sacrilegious words to many in MAGA, which is make Iran great again. So if you put it all together, and we've talked about the Don Roe doctrine before, but if you put it all together, peace has been the number one thing that he's cared about. And I've talked about this before, about he's asked, what does he want his legacy to be? He said, I want to be the peace president. I want to be known as the peace president. Now I'm sorry, did I bury the lead to a degree and not talk about what also happened this week, that the Gaza Board of Peace is forming as well? And let me think. Look at that. He's chairman of the board of the Gaza Board of Peace. So you see the through line, if you will. And so what does that mean exactly? As it relates to what we're talking about specifically with Iran, I believe that his mentality has shifted to say, hey, I have a chance of going down in the history books as the guy that liberated Iran, the Iranian people. Back from 1979, where it was the Shah, and then, of course, the mullahs took over, and Jimmy Carter with the debacle. Now we're looking, how many years is that? 8, 9, what was that, 45 years? I don't know, I can't remember. 8, 9, yeah, about 45 years. And this is a moment in history. And I think President Trump has fallen in love with that moment in history, significant president, peace president. And that's why I think he's going to pull the trigger, because this has been his MO in his second administration. And remember, he loves to talk about the 8 and quote a quarter wars, right? And 8 and a quarter wars is what he solved. How many times have we heard that from him? So this is important to him. And he's taken flack from the MAGA base, some of the MAGA base, the isolationists, the Tuckers and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and others. But this is where he's at this time around compared to the first time around.
Right, and we've discussed too the Russia-Ukraine situation, which is seemingly stalled. There hasn't been a whole lot of conversation about that over the last few weeks, but those negotiations continue, and we'll see how that shakes out. Hope that gets wrapped up at some point in the next few months or this year. But even the president has admitted that has been a more difficult conflict for him to navigate.
A tough cookie.
Yeah, a tough cookie, he's called it. Right, exactly. Let's switch over and talk a little bit about what's happening in Minnesota. It's been icy in Minnesota. And I don't mean to make light of a situation, but both there is significant unrest continuing up in Minnesota since the Renee Good shooting last week. Protests against ICE in Minneapolis continue. It's growing to other areas around the country as well. The Trump administration is doubling down, literally sending more ICE agents into Minnesota to help round up people in the country illegally. We're seeing so many cell phone videos of these different things happening, and the unrest from protesters, some of the actions by ICE agents and the interactions that are taking place up in Minnesota. The president said he was considering using the Insurrection Act to help put down the unrest in that state. This week, an ICE agent said he opened fire and shot a man in the leg after he was attacked by 3 Venezuelan nationals with a shovel and a broom handle during a raid. Now, the Insurrection Act of 1807 allows active duty military personnel to be deployed for law enforcement purposes in the United States. It was last used by President George H.W. Bush 30 years ago in California. That was at the request of the governor of California at that time. So, Dan, let me start with you on this one. Will bringing in the U.S. military to Minnesota, using the Insurrection Act, whether it's in Minnesota or any place else, would it help get things under control?
I mean, I would hope so. It's kind of disturbing to see what people are doing. This is not a peaceful protest from what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm seeing videos of people going into police cars and taking the guns out of the back and things like that. And you know, it's just honestly shocking to see people behaving in this way. I understand if you don't like ICE all of a sudden, even though we see the videos from 2016 when Obama was running and he was trying to look tough on the border. And so CNN does a ride along with him, and there's nobody, they're out there doing the same thing, enforcing the immigration laws, are detaining people who've overstayed visas, illegal immigrants, etc. And there's no cries of Nazi and things of that nature. And so whether you like this policy or not, you go ahead and protest, but what are we doing out here actively trying to stop them? That's what it feels like, right? And maybe it's just the clips I'm seeing on the internet, but it certainly feels like this is more than just, we're going to go stand with our signs out in the streets and honk our horns when we see them and just let them know we don't like them or we don't like this policy or whatever. It feels so much more than that. And so while this is rare, I don't know. I mean, just, you know, I don't have all of the intel on exactly how many incidents and all that stuff, but it certainly seems like this is something that may be warranted, and we'll see what kind of effect it has. But I would hope people would come to their senses and stop doing this. Like, it's not good for anyone.
No, and especially not good for them.
No.
I'm asked Renee Good. I'm sorry, we can't, right? I mean, that's sad. That's extremely sad. No one wanted.
David, real quick before you keep going, I just want to add on the Renee Good thing. You know, we talked about this last time. I saw another clip where the her significant other says, "Why did you use real bullets?" I mean, I think these people think it's all fun and games out here, and that's got to stop. And the people at the top saying, go out there and tell them you don't want. Like, I think that's got to stop too. I mean, this is bad. This is not good for this to continue escalating. And I feel like, whether you agree or not with it's kind of being pushed. I feel like they're being pushed into a corner here, and I just don't want to see any escalations on this.
I think social media ramps this up obviously a lot to the point where we all see the clips and we go, "Oh my gosh!" I think for the most part, there are a lot of folks that are out there that are just protesting, and they're doing their what you're allowed to do in America. Praise God, and I'm glad they're out there protesting. I might not agree with them. As a matter of fact, this just in, I don't, but I'm glad they're doing it as long as they're protesting. But the minute you start to assault an officer, whether it be ICE or federal or state or local, you become a criminal. Okay, maybe not in the court of law yet, but you have done something violent towards an officer. That doesn't make you a protester. That puts you under arrest and puts you in jeopardy, legal and otherwise. So there has to be a difference between the two. And we need to call it out, especially here at CBN. Because why? Oh, that's right. Our slogan, because the truth matters. And I think that was a very nuanced way for me to say it, which is there are people that are protesting. They're not doing a dang thing. That's truthful. And what's also truthful, two things can be true at the same time, is that people are indeed crossing the line. So that is the truth. Now, what is the percentage of that? I don't know. If I'm on X all day long, it's 98% of people, right? Yeah. But it's not. And the other thing I'd say is, guys, we're and with all due respect to Hillary Clinton, not to take her title, but we're living history. And what I mean by that is that this Insurrection Act, potentially, if President Trump pulls the trigger, and by the way, prediction business, I think he will, and because I don't think the mayor, Jacob Fry, and I don't think Walz, the governor there, are going to back down. I mean, they want the chaos. Read Rules for Radicals. They want the chaos. They want to bring this to even more of a chaotic situation. That's what liberals do. That's not my analysis. That's Saul Alinsky's analysis. And ask Clinton and many of the 1960s radicals. That's what they did. So I don't think it's going to stop, and I think the Insurrection Act is going to be implemented. So back to living history. The reason it's living history is, can we all go back to Birmingham? Can we all go back to the time that it was state versus federal officials? Mini civil war, if you will. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is going to go down. Our kids are going to read about this if indeed he does the Insurrection Act. Now, the difference is that in California, John, because you mentioned California, the California governor asked for the National Guard to be mobilized and for U.S. military to come in. Walz is not asking for that. And that's why this is even more of a powder keg. But think about it, guys. I mean, not to be dramatic, but this is the case. We would have if the Insurrection Act, if he goes forward with it, we would have the United States military, not ICE agents, not state and local, not the National Guard. All of that will be there on the ground. But we'll have the U.S. military, active U.S. troops arresting U.S. citizens. Guys, that's history making and potentially a major powder keg in this country. Do I think it would get under control eventually? Absolutely. But that is, for liberals, it's a bridge too far. And for folks that believe in the Trump administration, it's about time.
Yeah, and I know I don't think what local officials want is for federal officials to come in and do exactly what you're describing. I hear what you're saying about the rules of liberals in terms of ramping things up, but they also, the mayor has said words have to match actions, but the mayor has said, Mayor Fry has said, we cannot match violence with whatever it is the Trump administration or ICE agents are doing in our city. We have to be peaceful. And so I think a lot of that is, yes, to peacefully protest is like you said, a First Amendment protection, but it also could spur, like you're talking about, history and not the kind of history that you want to make in the
But
United
John,
States.
can I
Yeah.
just say real quick? But Tim Walz this week said, and he called on Trump to lower the temperature. Hey, how about he calls on himself to lower the temperature? He's the guy that called ICE Gestapo.
Mhm.
The Gestapo. So look, you can't say these liberals. I'm telling you, John. I mean, there's a whole long list of what they have said. Everybody wants to point to Trump's rhetoric and all that. Let's look at what the liberals there in Minnesota are saying. They are encouraging this. If you call if you call ICE Gestapo, the Gestapo, or if you say this is 1930s Germany, well, what do you think the people are going to do? They don't want to be a part of they don't want the Gestapo rounding them up. They don't want the Nazi Germany officials coming to their front door and asking to see their quote papers. So what are they going to do? They're going to fight back. They're going to fight back, and they're causing this. They're causing this with their rhetoric. And that's a real problem, guys.
David, politically speaking, some Senate Democrats, namely Minnesota Senator Tina Smith, says she will not agree to any budget funding that gives money to ICE unless there are serious reforms put in place here. And so there's a Washington, D.C. angle to this as well. She would likely be joined by enough Democrats in the Senate to prevent a budget deal from getting done. And, you know, we haven't talked a lot about it, but government funding needs to be in place by the end of this month, or else we go into another government shutdown. And this, if there is a government shutdown, it seems as though, whereas Obamacare subsidies is what caused the last government shutdown, Democrats wanting Republicans to make sure those subsidies were extended, and they were not, and eventually the government was reopened. That funding for the Department of Homeland Security seems to be the center of ways that the Democrats, at least it seems as though that seems the way Democrats in Capitol Hill feel like they can get a handle on whatever ICE is doing and the things that ICE are doing and the Trump administration is doing with ICE that they don't like. Do you see this leading to at least a partial government shutdown at the end of the month? And is this the lever that Democrats could and should use if they want to get change put together with ICE?
No, I don't think it's going to lead to a government shutdown. Having said that, I do think the Democrats will try. I'm talking about the liberal Democrats and others will try, but Schumer will stop them at this point. Schumer saw how the last government shutdown went, and it wasn't good for Democrats. And now they're going to double down for another shutdown over ICE funding. Okay, well, hold on. What does that mean? No more ICE funding. You know what that means? That means the Democrats are against law and order. That means the Democrats are against safety. That means the Democrats are for, in essence, open borders, because let's be honest, it's a distinction without a difference. If you're calling for no more ICE funding and you're saying, but then you're in essence saying you're for open borders because you don't want anybody deported from this country, in essence, is what they're saying. So go ahead, Democrats, knock yourself out from a PR political standpoint. That's the worst thing that they could ever do. They're on their way to potentially winning the House of Representatives in the midterms. The last thing they want to do is give Republicans any sort of opportunity to paint them as anti-safety, which, by the way, they will if they decide to do that government shutdown over ICE funding.
Dan, one more thing before we move on from this. We talked about the videos that we've seen on social media with ICE raids and the protests and the violence. Do you think, though, that this, however anybody may feel about it, do you think that is the Trump administration still winning the immigration PR war? And I ask that because the actual border situation right now, I think most people would admit that the Trump administration has done a terrific job in stemming the flow of illegal immigrants from coming into the country. But then you have, this was something that was talked about during the campaign, that the largest mass deportation in U.S. history, that's what this is all a part of. Do you think that this is what people signed up for, and that they're in solid footing with regards to the immigration PR front?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. My sense is that maybe it's not like a mortal lock yes, but I would say generally yes. And things like this Somalian fraud that we're seeing happen right now, I think probably add to that, because even though he's, like you said, getting credit for stemming the flow, we see what the net result has been. And when people see billions of dollars or whatever it is, hundreds of millions of dollars going to all of this fraud, and a lot of it directed towards migrants or illegal immigrants, whatever it is, I think the frustration level there is real. And I think that can cross party lines and go beyond just, a partisan thing. So if you see people and you're just trying to make your ends meet and you're struggling to get by, you don't ever get anything from the government because you work hard, you make just a middle of the road amount, you get very little from the government, and then you see somebody out there not from here just getting free handouts from government all day long on this stuff. I think there's, and again, is that all blown up by social media? I don't know, but I mean, they seem to be finding a lot of fraud and potential fraud, and I think those two issues are connected. So I think it all kind of plays together under the same sentiment. So if someone's answering the immigration question and like what their support or non-support of it is, I think that would factor in. And so therefore I would think it probably would lean toward yes to answer your question.
On the stuff with ICE as it relates to them doing some of these arrests, it's bad PR for the Trump administration, obviously, visually. I'm talking about visually, right? I mean, you guys remember this week, right, where we saw that woman dragged from her car, they cut the, right? Okay, so what is everybody, not everybody here, but I'm just like everybody out in TV land, if you will, when you see that, and let's say you're not a Trump supporter, because let's be honest, Trump supporters, this is what they voted for. They wanted ICE to go around and do this. Okay, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about independents and others, people in the middle. When they see videos like that from this past week of that woman dragged from the car, that leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and it doesn't look good. Now, having said that, and that's why they're losing the PR war. Having said that, it's my job to do some research on this. And I did. The woman dragged from the car said, her name is Aliyah Rahman. She said she was on her way to a doctor's appointment. Oh, isn't that sweet? Just on her way to a doctor's appointment, and look what happened to her. Time out. Lots more information coming now, and not from MAGA blogs, by the way. This is all verified. She was with Black Lives Matter for 10 years. She was part of this Code Progress group as well. She is, by the way, genderqueer, we should point out. She's a big LGBT activist, and she's big into the pro-Palestinian cause movement. So let me get this straight. You're saying a woman who was just innocently on her way to a doctor's appointment, but has this background, you're telling me that she finds herself in the middle of a street that ICE was trying to clear? Yeah, I don't buy it. But see, no one's going to really give you any of that context. Once again, back to the truth matters. Let's get the whole truth out there. And that's the whole truth. Now, I'm sorry, I just don't buy the fact that she was just a friendly neighbor on the way to a doctor's appointment and went down the wrong street. She was asked to get out of the car. Actually, she was told to move forward in the car, and there was no one in front of her. I know a lot of people are like, oh, peel away, right? No. ICE actually said to her, please move forward. You're blocking the street. Could you please move forward? So here's an idea, just me. Move forward. Like, can you do what the officer says? She did not. She stayed right there. You put that plus her track record, and I'm just putting two and two together. I'm not coming to any conclusion. I'm coming to some pretty strong analysis that there's more than just that she was heading to a doctor's appointment that day. And that's the nuance that gets lost in all this, because back to the bad PR situation for the Trump administration, that is the problem. That all people see is, wow, do you see that woman dragged from the car today? That's horrible. What is ICE doing? Mm-hmm. That's as far as people go. But they're not doing the deep dive that I just did. I bet you anything. I'm not saying you guys knew that or didn't know that, but my guess is if you line 10 people up on the street, I guarantee you 0 out of 10 know the whole story there.
I mean, I didn't know that, and
exactly.
I'll be honest. I saw the video, and it definitely made me feel a certain way. And right. It wasn't good. I see
understand.
The videos. I see the videos of like and that's the thing is like when it's on social media, the caption is, a 19-year-old arrested after completing a shift in Target and just like thrown onto the floor. And, it's like you see those, you read those, and you do get a sense when the videos line up with some of the incendiary language that you're saying that Governor Walz has been using. And so you make those connections, and you're right. You have to do a deep dive into those things. And I'm here to tell you, there's probably some of those cases that are exactly like you said, David, where you have someone who's willingly and intentionally trying to put themselves in the middle and create a viral moment. And I would also say there are probably a lot of instances, or some instances, whatever the number is, of ICE acting in ways in which they shouldn't and conducting raids in which they shouldn't. And as a voter, I didn't want this. I don't like the idea of going into someone's place of business without a warrant and bringing and hauling people out of there. So, I mean, it depends where you, I think a lot of it does depend on what you voted for in the last election. If this is exactly what you wanted to see, and then this is not what you wanted to see. So
yeah. I know we got to run. I know we got to run, but I do want to say, you mentioned the word warrant. I'm sorry to hog the conversation. Sorry, guys, but you mentioned the warrant. I just want to be clear. So everybody, once again, because the truth matters, I think it's important that people who are watching this understand there are two types of warrants. There's an administrative warrant that ICE can use, or a judicial warrant. A judicial warrant is because they're looking for people that have actually committed a crime and say, hello, knock, knock. We have a judicial warrant. And we're coming in to search your place, and boom, boom, they can knock down the door and go in. They've got a warrant, a judicial warrant. If you have an administrative warrant, you can't just boom, boom, knock down the door. You can't do that. You have to be asked. You have to ask to be let in, and the person inside the home doesn't have to let you in. If ICE has an administrative warrant, I feel like AOC. It's like I'm teaching people here what you can or can't do. But that's the truth. You don't have to let them in if they have an administrative warrant. But if you let them in, if you say, okay, come on in, then at that point they can say, let me see your papers and all of that type of thing. So anyhow, I just feel like it's important that, we have a responsibility, all of us as citizens, to actually spend some time and do some legwork and research and stuff. I have to do it because, well, not just that I get paid for it, if you will, but I want to be an informed citizen. And I think everybody should want to be an informed citizen. That's the only way to get to the truth. You have to, you can't just cherry pick Bible verses, right? You have to read the entire Bible. You have to read the entire chapter. You have to read the entire book to get the flavor, the sense of exactly what's going on. It's the same concept.
Well, let me run one more thing by you guys before we wrap up. A couple of interesting polls came out this week. AP and CNN both released polls, and I know I like to look at all of the polls, like the Real Clear Politics average of all the polls encompasses mainstream polls, polls from conservative outlets, liberal outlets, all of it. So you get a pretty good sense of what the picture is. I do think, though, it is interesting in the AP poll and the CNN poll. Largely, and these numbers, I think they largely are telling the same story. So we'll go with these for the moment. Both of them have the president at a 40% approval rate right now, 59% approval of his job performance so far. And those numbers are pretty much exactly where they were from March, specifically with the AP poll. At the end of his first term, his numbers were 40% approve, 58% disapprove. It's 40-59, virtually unchanged since the end of his first term, and much has happened here in this second term. So I think it's interesting that his approval numbers haven't moved. I mean, it seems as though he has locked in 4 in 10 American voters, or 4 in 10 Americans. He's kind of locked them in as in terms of his job approval. And the other interesting number that I want you guys to react to is 58% in this. This was a CNN poll. 58% say Trump has gone too far in using the power of the presidency and the executive branch, up from 52% at the start of his term last year. At the same time, the share of people who expect Trump's presidency to fundamentally change America has gone down from 52% last April to 41% now. So the conclusion of the poll was, while most believe his second term will significantly change the country, most people say they think those changes will eventually fade. Dan, I want to get your reaction to that first.
Well, I mean, if it's related to the executive actions, I mean, I think the problem with those is that the next guy that comes in can just swap them right around. So I think that's some of the frustration that Republicans have had over the years, that while it's all fun in the first 90 days or 100 days or whatever to sign a bunch of executive orders and do some things you like on one side of the aisle, how long is it going to last? When President AOC gets in there, and just joking, but whoever it is next, that's not a Republican, they can just turn it around. And so I think Republicans over the years have been frustrated that you don't take these legislative majorities that they've had at a few different times and get some bills passed that are, going to stay unless they get overturned in Congress, which obviously is much harder to do.
Yeah, look, Trump is who he is. Everybody's had an opinion on Trump since he glided down the escalator. And the reason they've had that opinion is because they knew Trump. He was a public figure before that. And it just cemented everything. So it's either Trump derangement syndrome on one hand, and you're never going to get those people to show up in the polls and say, you know what? Yeah, he's not that bad. No, you're never going to get that. And on the flip side, you're going to get a lot of people that see Trump do stuff, and while they may not agree, they're going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, saying, oh, well, it's Trump. Everything works out for Trump, and that's kind of cultish, let's be honest. And that's, because let's be honest, too, some of the stuff he's doing, if Biden was doing this, or if a neocon president, imagine Mitt Romney taking over Venezuela. What would MAGA say at that point? MAGA would be up in arms. But no, they don't do it with Trump. Trump, it's like, oh, we trust Trump. We trust Trump. Same thing with Greenland. Same thing. I can go down the list. So there's some hypocrisy there. I'm sorry, MAGA, if you're listening, it's true. There's hypocrisy there. If this was Mitt Romney, if this was George W. Bush, you would be like, wait a minute, this is globalist stuff that Trump is doing on the world stage. He's a globalist, is what they would cry if Biden did it. He's a globalist. Trump does it. You know what? I trust Trump. I trust him. He's not into nation building. He's just going to go in and go out. And there's some truth to that, by the way. El-Baghdadi, Soleimani, the Iran nuclear strikes. I mean, typically, Trump is not into nation building. That is accurate. But they give Trump, the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's weak. I think that's really weak. I don't think that is sustainable as it relates to philosophical core stuff. Sorry. You can't just say Trump it's going to be fine because I trust him. But if Biden or someone else did the same thing, you would have a problem. Sorry, that doesn't comport in my view.
Well, I think that's a good place for us to leave things here on this episode of Navigating Trump 2.0. David Brody, Dan Andros, thanks for joining me once again this week.
Thanks, guys.
All right, John.